Hello everybody, this is Jeff Beston with IntuiLab. As IntuiLab's #1 fan, it's my distinct honor to present to you what's new in IntuiFace version 6.0. As I like to say, when you change the integer on the software, that's a big deal. And we're jumping from version 5 to version 6. It's a big deal. We've been working very hard on this release of our software, months and months of development effort and testing to bring you a lot of new capability to the best product on the planet for no-coding interactive content creation. It's best for me to do this as a demo, so although I could just list a bunch of features, it's important for me that you understand not just what features exist, but how they actually bring value. So I hope you'll indulge me and allow me to show you how these features work. Let's talk about them at a high level. First, we're going to discuss experience properties, experience layers, and experience triggers. So these are all new concepts that expand tremendously the flexibility you can bring to your design, and I'm going to demonstrate all of that for you. Then we'll talk about the brand new API Explorer. This thing is so major, we've got patent pending on the technology. The idea is we can take any request URL, that is any request for a REST-based web service, and automatically generate an integration with that service, a dynamic connection, enabling you to dynamically show any information accessible through that web service. It's amazing. Any digitized archive is now accessible and you don't write code. It's pretty impressive, and I'm going to show that to you through the demo and use that as an ability to also show you the brand new X-ray tool we've developed and what we call the design assistant. Once we do that, we'll move on to external triggering. It's the name for a method we've developed to simplify a means of communication between external devices and IntuiFace. Could be any kind of device, could be RFID, NFC reader, could be motion detector, you name it. It's a very simple method for that external device to alert IntuiFace to the fact that something has happened, that an event has occurred, and sharing information about that event. We'll then move on to the updated Share and Deploy console. For those of you who used sharing in the past or remote deployment, you know Management Console. What we've done is overhauled the user interface. It's much more sensible, certainly more modern, a lot faster, and brings new capability, and I want to show you that. I'll then briefly touch on some improved performance for IntuiFace Composer and Player, and also talk about a refreshed look. We even worked on the aesthetics of the product itself. And then we'll wrap things up by taking a look at a brand new packaging, shared licensing, and pricing model. It's the first change to our pricing model, major change in 5 years. So it's probably been a long time coming. Our users have evolved, right? Needs have evolved and changed, and we're moving along with it. I'll share those with you as well. First, experience properties, layers, and triggers. Jump into edit mode. Let's start by thinking about the background of an experience. This experience I'm showing you now is currently constructed the way you would have in version 5. If we open the scene structure panel, here's the scene itself. If we open up the properties panel, you'll note that as in version 5, here's the background property for the scene. It's currently set as an image, and that image is this particular image. That's the background. You know this. Let's jump into play mode. Watch what happens as I navigate to the next scene. The next scene is structured the exact same way. It has a background image. It's this image. 1, 2, 3, navigate. See how everything was affected by the transition effect? Let me go back. 1, 2, 3, go back. The background image was impacted by the transition effect, just like the content in the scene itself. And that's how it works in version 6. When it's the scene background itself, it's specific to the scene. Every scene could have a different background, but even if it's the same, during that scene-to-scene transition, you see the transition effect applied to the background. Enhancement number 1. You don't have to use the scene for the background. You could use the experience itself. The experience itself has a background property. For the sharp-eyed among you, you may have noticed there's another item in the scene structure panel, a new one. This is the experience itself. And if I open the properties panel for the experience itself, it has a background property. See that on the right? Which by default is transparent. Let's set this one to an image. The message says, hold on a second, you have a scene background. Until you make the scene background transparent, you're never going to see the experience background. Should the scene background be transparent? Yes, it should. So I'll say yes. Now it's transparent, but I haven't set an image yet for the experience background. That's still blank here on the right. We'll choose the same image. Visually, it looks the same, but this background is no longer a property of the scene, it's a property of the background. And you'll discover the advantage of that is that the experience background is global. It's shared universally by all scenes. Here's the next scene. Let me change its background to transparent as well. Watch what happens when I set it to transparent. Visibly, nothing happened. Why? Because the experience background is universal. Let's jump into play mode. Check this out. Watch what happens with the background now. 1, 2, 3, navigate. Let's go back. 1, 2, 3, navigate. It didn't change. That's because unlike the scene background, which can be different than any scene, but even if it's the same, we'll have a transition effect applied to it. The experience background is global. It's not reloaded every time you navigate. It's always in memory. It's always visible. Now, like the scene background, the experience background can be a color, can be an image, could be a video, or it could be transparent. It's the same options. The difference is it is unaffected by the transition effect applied during scene-to-scene navigation. That's pretty cool. Let me give you another example of why it's interesting to have this notion of an experience independent of a scene. Let's click the experience in the scene structure panel, right-click, add a trigger. Let's have an inactivity timer at the experience level. This is not at the scene level. At the experience level, let's have an inactivity timer of 120 seconds that repeats. So if somebody touches the screen, it starts over. Now what I want to do is, whenever this timer is triggered, we navigate to the agenda scene, to that home scene I showed you earlier. So let's apply this trigger to every scene except the home scene. The home scene doesn't need the inactivity timer. It's already there, right? So what I'm saying is that for every scene in the experience except the home scene, add an inactivity timer of 120 seconds. If it's raised, if it's triggered, then scene-to-scene navigation, go to the scene named home. Impressive, right? Rather than having inactivity timers in every scene, could be the same one, but you got to reproduce it. Every scene have its own timer. You can have a single inactivity timer at the experience level, and it applies everywhere. Very powerful feature, frequently requested feature. So this is a big deal for a lot of you. Let's talk about the next big innovation. We just talked about how the experience is now an independent entity you can work with to change the background, add triggers. And note, by the way, because it's in the scene structure panel, it does now have properties in the properties panel. You no longer have to go up to the menu up top. They're just here in the properties panel. Here's the next innovation. Remember, you can have any number of layers inside a scene. Okay? We default to 1. You can add as many as you wish. You gotta have at least 1, but you can have as many layers as you want. In the current version, version 5, you can only have 3. No more, no less. Here you can have as many as you want. But it's still scene specific. Every scene has its own set of layers. We have also now introduced the notion of experience layers. You see this button on the project itself on the experience? Let me click it and add a foreground experience layer. It's a bit subtle, but there's a little bar here. This experience layer is not in the scene. It's external to the scene. It is outside the scene. And you can kind of see where we're going. Just like the experience itself, things we do to an experience layer show up in all the scenes. Let's try it out. Content library, here's a logo. We'll add it to the foreground layer. So there's the logo. I can move it to the bottom right hand corner. All right, if this experience layer is global, then if I go to the next scene, it should be there. Let's see. Yep, it's there. Yep, it's there. It's everywhere. So by default, an experience layer can be everywhere. Unlike the scene background or an experience background, if I put an experience layer in the background, I can put anything I want. Images, videos, documents, collections, right? I can design anything I want, but still treat it as a background. And guess what? Like the experience background, it'll be unaffected by transition effects. No matter what you do in the experience layer, playing videos, playing audio, it will play through the transition effect. That's amazing. And again, it's been a frequent request, and now you can do it. You can have content on screen that is unaffected by navigation from one scene to another. Let me show you one other thing about experience layers. If we go to the home scene itself, let me close this layer. So one of the properties, you see the experience layer, it's here. It's everywhere. It's not multiple instances per scene. It's just everywhere, which means if I edit it here, it's edited everywhere. For the scene itself, if we go to the properties panel, appearance, see the property here on the right? I can choose to not show that layer in this scene, which probably makes sense. Remember that that graphic may just not be relevant to this particular scene. I can hide it. So I can choose whether or not an experience layer is visible in a given scene. In fact, thanks to triggers and actions, you can cause an experience layer to be hidden or to be shown. So it's not limited to a design time decision. We've updated a lot of the samples in the marketplace to use this principle. So not only is this something you can easily play with, but a lot of the samples were pre-built to enable you to work with these features right out of the box. Good, huh? Let's go to the next topic. API Explorer. Let's open this up a little bit. This is a big deal because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we now make it possible to dynamically connect to any REST-based web service, pull information from it, push information to it, and you never write code. It's much easier to just give you an example, so let's do that. We'll open up the Interface Assets panel. Let's add an interface asset. Right at the top, you see this? Create your own REST-based web services interface asset. Click. Technically, this is browser-based, so what's happening under the covers is we're loading what looks like a web page, although it doesn't run in a browser. It's something we host. Here's API Explorer. Let's start with a sample, with an example. We'll do the IntuiLab blog. So if I click this, it's going to load up the XML feed for our blog. In general, what the API Explorer can do is take any JSON response, any XML response, and show you the results here. You can see this. These are the results of that response. Now, if you don't know what XML or JSON are, okay, don't worry about it. The idea is that any REST-based web service, when it's asked for information, returns that information in one of two formats, XML or JSON. And API Explorer knows how to read that response and display it to you in a very easy style. This is the response. Now, there are lots of things I can do in here to tweak it, but to keep things simple, I've deselected all the items and will now pick the things I want to show in my experience. So there's over 100 blog entries. Do you see that? The property is called an item, but there's over 100 blog entries. I want to have the title. I would like to have the description, and I would like to have the main URL. So there are three properties I want to display in my experience. See the arrow button at the bottom right? What we're saying is, please create for me an interface asset for this service. In this case, it's the blog feed, and create a design based on the three properties I just selected. Watch this. Click. Let's give it a name. IntuiLab blog. Call the category blogs. Create. Kaboom. Two things happened. On the left, see that? There's the interface asset. On the right, here's the feed from the blog. And this is the real deal. Let me push play. This is a live feed. Apparently there's no description for this one, but see this? This is live. This is coming in over the wire. Do you see the layout here? IntuiFace version 6 now includes a design assistant that uses machine learning to decide an optimal means for displaying the content you selected. In API Explorer, we said title, description, image. And the machine learning engine in IntuiFace said, what's the best way to display this? And it took a guess. But it's always watching. So it's going to watch what we do and how we organize this content and learn from that, so that the next time you add it, it'll be a little bit smarter and a little more in line with your design preferences. It's a learning engine that will continue to get better over time. And by the way, this sets the table for us to do some really amazing things where we can present multiple means for displaying content. Now, there are simple things right now. You notice there's 2 rabbit ears here. If I click the bottom rabbit ear, this design assistant allows me to pick other collection types. Now, we defaulted to an asset grid. I can make this an asset flow. So I can easily change the visuals using this design assistant. But again, it's going to learn from us to watch how we organize content in an asset flow in the context of this blog feed and become better at anticipating the designs we like and creating it for us. It's pretty amazing. It's something we've been working really hard on. Let me go back to the asset grid. So that's my feed. Let's open this up a little bit. Double click, double click. I'm going to reorganize. I'm going to change the design. Let's spread this out. Move the description down here, the image up here. Let's put the title here. And we're just going to do some quick fixes. There we go. Here's the description. Notice all of the individual items are updated automatically. This is a beautiful feature we even had in version 5. What I'd like to do is add the publication date. I would like to have the publication date in this design. So let's go to the X-ray. For every interface asset in IntuiFace, you can open the X-ray. That's this button right here. Click. The X-ray inspects the interface asset and tells me things about it. First, it tells me all of the editable properties and all the read-only properties. It also tells me all of the triggers, if there are any triggers associated with this interface asset. There's none with this one. And all of the actions associated with this interface asset. Turns out there's one. So in a single location, I can get an inventory of all of the properties, all the triggers, and all of the actions. Now remember, what I wanted to do was add the publication date to this design. So here we have this. See the little button here? By default, it's only showing the properties I selected in the API Explorer. Remember that? I selected 3 properties. Here they are. If I click the button, it's really a slider. It shows me all of the properties accessible. So when I selected those properties in the API Explorer, it wasn't what I wanted to have accessible. It's what I wanted to visualize. All of the properties are accessible. Let me scroll down. So here's the individual items. Here's the publication date. See that? Here's the publication date. See the button? Click. And I've added it to my experience. And notice the date's different. It's different for each entry. So one of the nice things about the X-ray is not only is it an inventory, but I can use it to add things to my experience. It also works with drag and drop, by the way. I use the button, but I could also drag and drop it. And it creates an instance of that property in my experience. So with very little effort, I have reproduced the IntuiLab blog inside IntuiFace. If I knew what I was doing and wasn't talking, right, this would have taken me 30 seconds. And now I have a nicely designed representation of our blog without a lot of effort. So hopefully that's an impressive display of capability for IntuiFace. What I'd like to do is take it a little farther and show you a more advanced example. I'm going to hide this layer. So you can hide layers. Let's hide it. So that's entirely gone. Let's add a second layer to my experience. Let's keep the title. So I'm moving the title back. Isn't that cool? Now I have a second layer. Here it is. It's visibly empty. All the content's in the first layer. I want to add content to this second layer, excuse me, from an external source. Let me show you that data source. This is a data source hosted by a service called Airtable. Airtable, it's a service where we have a fondness for. It looks like Excel, it acts like a database. And this sort of Excel looking view might be familiar. If you've seen some of our webinars, you'll recognize this photo gallery contents. You got rows and columns. This particular row, there's 3 photos for this particular artwork, and there's 2 for this one and 1 for this one. And there's a collection name and an artist and a creation date. So it kind of looks like a database. I can take a gallery view so you can see each individual item. So this is a kind of a card-based view. And the idea is I want to reproduce this in IntuiFace. Well, what's nice about Airtable, and this can be done for any service that has REST-based web services accessibility, Airtable makes it easy to generate a REST-based web service that accesses this data. So let's do that. Click API documentation. Photo list table, list records. Now I know what I'm doing, but what I have right here, thanks to Airtable, is what's called a curl expression. It's a way of requesting information from a REST-based web service. I'm just going to copy this back to IntuiFace. API Explorer, remember, we're opening up API Explorer. But now, rather than using one of these examples, I'm pasting that curl expression. Paste. And then load her up. Under the covers, the same thing is happening. We're making a request. The service is responding, in this case, I believe, with a JSON response. Here's the answer. And it should be familiar. So it came back with 3 records. There were multiple rows, multiple records, but it defaults to 3. In fact, you can see that on the left. You see how on the left, the REST-based web services query defaults to 3 records? I can choose to deactivate that parameter. Watch this. Click. It refreshes the feed, and now I have all 36 rows. So I can easily modify my parameter on the fly. So here's all 36 rows. We're looking at the first of those 36 rows. Remember how that first row had 3 pictures? Here it is, 1 of 3 pictures. There they are. Pretty neat. So what I'd like to do now is select some items to add it into my experience. So let's deselect all of them, and we'll take, let's see, artwork name, collection, artist, and we'll take the first image. Okay, so 3 text items and then the image. Click. Here we'll call photo list. Why not? Airtable. Sure. Create. And there we are. A dynamic data feed bringing all that information in from Airtable into my experience. And then, as you saw, I can reorganize that however I want. I can change the layout however I wish. Which is pretty cool. If I go into play mode, remember how the first row had 3 photos? So what does IntuiFace do? See me on the left here? It's a collection of 3 photos. Remember the second row with 2 photos? It defaults to this collection of 2 photos. So it automatically adapts to the information coming back and creates this visual. It's amazing stuff. And we're really proud of it. One last point I'll make, a small point, just so you're aware. Any of these interface assets generated by API Explorer, if I just select them, right-click, I can edit them. I can go back to API Explorer and modify the query in any way I think is necessary. So it's not like you have to recreate everything from scratch. Awesome. That's the API Explorer. Next topic, external triggering. If you recall what I mentioned at the beginning, the concept here is to make it extremely simple for external devices to tell IntuiFace that something has happened and to share information about that something. There are ways to do that with interface assets. It could even be very advanced approaches. You could do it, but it required a lot of coding and either in terms of time or skill set that might have been complicated. This is much easier. The idea is this. Player acts like a web server, enabling it to receive requests from external devices. What you do is you configure the external thing to make this call. Do you see this? http://. This particular call will bring 2 pieces of information. See this? Parameter 1, parameter 2. 2 pieces of information. You can do with it what you want. Parameter 1 could be the event. Parameter 2 could be information about the event, whatever you want. You simply configure that external device to send out this request. Player sees it and reacts to it. It reacts to it using the message is received trigger. So the message is received trigger is listening for this request. And when this request comes in, it sees the two parameters, and you can treat it like any other trigger. Let me show you how that works. Let's hide this guy and add two text assets to my experience. So here's one text asset, and we'll duplicate. Here's a second. Oh, did I do duplicate? Duplicate. There we go. Okay. I have two text assets, and what we can do is, let's increase the size a little bit so it's easy to see. Okay, I have two text assets. Here's the idea. Here's the plan. I want to send information. Oh, there is a third text asset in there. Whoops. Okay. I want to send information to this experience from an external device. To prepare IntuiFace to receive that message, I need to use that trigger. Remember, the message is received trigger. We'll do that at the scene level. So here we are on the scene itself. Right click, add a trigger, external source, message is received, and we can expect up to two parameters. Now, if I put in parameter values, it acts like a conditional. It requires those parameter values to be triggered. By leaving them blank, we're saying we'll accept any value, and let's do that. We'll accept any value. So when a message is received, then I want to assign the two parameter values to the two text assets. So text 1, text, set text, and we'll bind that value to messages received, parameter 1. So I'm going to take the value of parameter 1, map it to the first text asset. Let's duplicate this. We'll do for the second text asset, binding will be to the second parameter. See that? So when the message is received, we are going to set the text of the two text assets to the value of the two parameters. When I go into play mode, IntuiFace is listening. It's waiting to hear if any request occurs. Here in Notepad, I have a request. This means this PC, if you're familiar with this notation for specifying device, it means here. It says send this request to this PC, and here are the two parameters. Parameter 1, new user. Parameter 2, John Smith. Let's copy that. Go to, in this case, Chrome. Paste it. Go. And we'll go back to Composer. And see that? John Smith, new user. We mapped the values to these text assets thanks to a very simple notation. Okay, yeah, I get it. If you're not familiar with how to configure external devices to make this call, it's a little challenging. But for those people in the know, this is trivial and makes it very easy for a motion detector or light detector or an RFID NFC reader to capture information, tell IntuiFace, somebody just badged in, or there's been movement, and oh, by the way, here's information about that. It makes it very easy to work with. So that's what we mean by external triggering. Next topic. Let's clean up our space a little bit here. The share and deploy console. Big revamp here. It's easier if I just show you. Here we go. The share and deploy console exists to facilitate sharing and deployment. And if you remember, in the old management console, there was a list of your published experiences at the top. There was a list of all of the players in your account at the bottom. You can get information about experiences. You can do drag and drop for deployment. Conceptually speaking, it's the same idea, but it's much cleaner and it's much faster. So first of all, we've separated the player view from the experiences view. Right here is the experiences view. There's a lot of experiences in here. You can see that. This is the account we use to run webinars. So there's tons of published material here. If I click any of them, it opens up an information panel about that experience, that published experience, some high-level information, a description if I want, and then in a single place. If I want to share it with a URL, I can do that here. If I want to share it with an account, I can do that here. If I want to submit it to the marketplace because I want to sell it or give it away to attract business perhaps, I can do that here. And new and interesting, I can deploy directly from the experience. So I can specify the experience. I can then filter by name or by tag and by operating system all of my players, and then select the ones I want to deploy it to, and then down on the bottom just click deploy. So we've really streamlined and simplified the process for remote deployment. And this works both ways, right? So what I could do is go to the player view. So here's my players. I can get information about this player. Because it's a Windows PC, I can remotely restart the PC, restart player, or reboot the PC. I can remotely update the player software if I want to. At the bottom, this is where I set my player preferences in terms of things like what happens when player launches. I can collect data points collected on this device. Brand new feature, I can get player logs directly through Management Console. I don't have to be on the device to visualize and copy the system log information, which is helpful for troubleshooting. And I can deploy from this view. I can pick which experience I care about and then click the deploy button. But what's nice is I can select multiple players. Again, I can sort by name, I can tag players, sort them by tags, all the devices in Boston, for example, maybe sort by operating system, and then collectively run a deployment. So this is all selected devices. I can configure preferences, collect data, get system logs, or deploy. Okay. For those of you familiar with Management Console, I have to imagine this is a breath of fresh air. It's much simpler. It's more intuitive. I promise you it's quick. It's a very convenient means of exploring your content and effectively deploying that content. All right, next topic. Let's go back to Composer. Improve performance and refreshed look. Maybe the biggest news is that starting in version 6, Composer and Player on Windows are available with a 64-bit architecture. All the way through version 5, it was a 32-bit application. It will be available as both. So there'll be a 32-bit version of version 6 on Windows. There'll also be a 64-bit version. The advantage of being a 64-bit version is it gives us unlimited access to system RAM, which means we can store more content in memory, which makes it much harder to cause performance problems. If you wanted to put 10 full HD videos in memory and play them all at the same time, well, that'd be a big challenge, I think, for IntuiFace. When it's 32-bit, there's just not enough RAM to put all that stuff in memory. It could still be a challenge. You need one heck of a PC. I still wouldn't advise it. But you could put much more content in memory, like playing multiple videos, because we're a 64-bit architecture. Again, I'm not encouraging 10 videos, but the idea is you can have much more visual content, videos and images and documents and audio files, and IntuiFace can scale. So that's a big deal. And again, it's been a frequent request, and now you got it. Some other improvements. The player on iPad and Android, we invested a lot of time in improving collection loading and scroll time. Particularly, we've had a lot of items in there. There were some visual artifacts, a little bit of caching was going on, and we tried to make that a lot smoother and quicker. And hopefully you'll be able to tell that when you try it. We have kind of given a facelift to all of the messages in IntuiFace, all of the pop-up information. And even to the installer. It's a brand new installer. I think it's cleaner, it's faster, it has less problems. Some of that you're not going to see the difference. It just helps us, but we invested time in that. And we even have messages. Oh, that's the inactivity timer that just kicked in. And we even have some improved messages. It's something that we take pride in. All of the messages, all those pop-ups in Composer, they need to be actionable, they need to be clear, and we're always revisiting those and making sure they make sense. So that's been done as well. Final topic, could be a big one: packaging, shared licensing, and pricing. Now, it's going to be difficult to talk about all the details here, because particularly if you're new to us and you're not overly familiar with the model, the fact that we made changes may not even register. And if you do know the old model well, you're going to want to know lots of details, and it's going to be tough to share that here. So I'm going to spend time at a high-level view, let you know about the big changes, And then you can always follow up with us offline, contact sales, contact support. We can answer the more detailed questions. But here it is at a high level. In the current model, there are 3 composer editions. In the new model, there are 4 composer plans. In a sense, we've added a new tier. Today we have Free Pro and Enterprise. Now we have Free Essential Premier Enterprise. We've added a middle tier. Let's get a closer look at that. Note, by the way, that the prices here are in dollars. If you were in a country where it's euros, it would be in euros. So it's the same amount, just euros instead of dollars. So here we have 4 composer plans. It's not about player. In fact, not that many changes in player. I'll touch on the changes that exist, but for the most part, there's not major changes with player. It's with composer that there are big changes. No more 3 editions. It's now 4 plans. What's the difference? Well, the essential plan from a feature perspective is very much like Pro. Here's the main difference. It's now unlimited license transfers. You see that down here? In the existing model, the old model, subscription licenses limited how often they could be moved. In the new model, they are unlimited. You can move them as often as you want. One of the main advantages, you may not need as many licenses in the new model as you needed in the old. Maybe you have 3 people using Composer, but only 1 person at a time. Maybe you only need 1 license. In the old model, you'd really need 3 because we limited how often you could move those licenses. So all subscription tiers are now unlimited transfers. The Essential plan is very much like the Pro plan. The Pro plan was $468. The Essential plan is now $600, although again, remember, unlimited transfers. This sort of brand new middle plan, we're calling it the Premier plan. It has the same price as the old Enterprise edition, which is $996. This includes custom interface assets. Let me open it up. It includes the custom interface assets. See this? The ability to work with secondary accounts and the ability to collect data via the data tracking feature. Okay? In fact, in a way, compared to the old Enterprise, it's everything in the old Enterprise except remote deployment. Remote deployment requires what we're now calling the Enterprise plan, that top tier plan. If you want to do remote deployment, you need the top tier plan that starts at $1,800 annually. But again, all licenses can be transferred an unlimited number of times, so the number of licenses you require might be far fewer than in the old model. And uniquely for Composer Enterprise, there's multi-year and volume discounting for the Enterprise license. So the more licenses you buy, the more licenses you prepay, the cheaper it gets. Okay. One other detail I'll share on the Composer side is that every plan is an exclusive tier. You can't mix Composer tiers. It's got to be all Essential, all Premier, all Enterprise. All right, here's probably a question some of you have. So what about my old licenses? Here's the story. You can keep them forever. You can renew them forever at the old price. As long as you renew your old licenses, you can keep them as long as you want. We will even, when this model is live, let you continue to purchase old model licenses for about 45 days after we ship version 6. So that's about the middle of July, and you'll get lots of emails about it. So not only will we honor your old models, your old licenses, as long as you renew them, we'll honor them forever. We'll even let you purchase new licenses off that old model till about the middle of July. At that point, you can no longer buy new licenses off the old model, but you can still use all of the existing licenses you have and renew them. We do give you the ability to upgrade, though. And in fact, during that transition period through the middle of July, we'll discount your upgrade to the new model. But that's your choice. You don't have to do it. One other fringe benefit, though, and this gives me an opportunity to talk about Player, because Player, for the most part, hasn't changed. There's really no need to upgrade. It's the same packaging. It's the same pricing, with really just a couple of exceptions. First, again, unlimited license transfers. That's new for subscription licenses. You did not have that in the old model. Subscription players, unlimited transfers. All of them also support volume discounting and multi-year prepaid discounts. So that's a big deal. and specifically for Perpetual Player for Windows. We have eliminated the Perpetual Composer option. It doesn't exist anymore. Only the annual composer options exist. If you have an annual enterprise license, you can buy Perpetual Player for Windows. Okay? Anybody with a Composer Enterprise license can buy Perpetual Player for Windows. The cost is $480, and this is white label. Most of you weren't overly familiar with the perpetual licensing. That's why I'm not going too deep in it. But for those who are familiar, no longer Perpetual Composer Enterprise, only annual Composer Enterprise. You can prepay multiple years, and you have entitlement to purchase Perpetual Player for Windows licenses that are volume discounted starting at $480, and these are all white label. Again, forgive me, I know there's a lot of detail here. You're interested in getting deep. I want to make sure that I don't lose the newbies, but give enough to those that are experienced. Data tracking hasn't changed at all. Exactly the same. So nothing to relearn there. That's it, guys. Lots to cover. I think it's very exciting. I can't tell you how hard the team worked on it. And we've taken really great pride in what we've been able to produce and are very excited for you to try it out. I think it brings a lot of new flexibility and power to your design needs, and we're super excited to see what you can do with it. This notion of experience layers, for example, I know some of you are going to come up with things we didn't even think of. So I hope I've imparted a little bit of excitement. I hope you're ready to jump on board and take advantage of this release. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you so much for taking a look at IntuiFace. Take care, everyone.